This is not an original observation to make, but when Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse released, it was essentially the closest thing we had to a perfect animated movie at that point. In a landscape of generic CGI movies with cookie-cutter character designs and realistic, incongruous rendering techniques, it is difficult to emphasize how refreshing it was to see an animated film utilizing such experimental visual design philosophies. Into the Spider-Verse had taken cues from numerous artistic mediums like comic books, graffiti, and print media, while masterfully combining 3D and 2D animation into something with a wholly cohesive and original vision. The script is pretty sharp too, with characters that are endearing and unique interpretations of existing Spider-Man media. With its predecessor, and the recently debuted Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which somehow manages to be an even better film than that, Across the Spider-Verse has massive shoes to fill in this budding movement of stylized computer animation. Into the Spider-Verse still affects computer animation about 5 years later. Some movies have improved on its foundation, others have misunderstood it, but due to being its sequel, Across the Spider-Verse is already a role model for theatrical animated films moving forward. And I'm happy to say that despite some flaws, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse still carries an ambitious, striking vision that will undoubtedly become contagious for other film studios in the near future. Across the Spider-Verse experiments a ton, not just with different animation styles, but with different film mediums entirely. Donald Glover also makes an appearance as the Prowler, a live-action character inserted into an animated world. All the Spider people and their worlds allow for the art team to combine vastly different art styles and allow them to coexist together. Spider-Man India and his world of Manhattan are rendered even more like a comic book than the previous movie. This world features more defined halftones and outlines. Even the colors are slightly misaligned with those outlines, as if they were printed on actual paper. Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara, has sketchy outlines that extend past the sharp angles on his body, just like the source material. I feel like the main Spider-Verse art style is toned down and not as sharp as the previous movie, but I really appreciate that this film decides to dip its toes into multiple, vastly different visual aesthetics and techniques. The combination of 2D and 3D is even more noticeable this time around. A character in the beginning is done in the style of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches, with design notes and diagrams popping up every time he does something. I was also incredibly excited to see how this film would handle Hobie Brown, Spider-Punk, and I was absolutely not disappointed. He's constantly changing color, and you could see the outlines around him and his guitar changing shape with every frame. You can also see paper textures and even text in front of him, as if he were drawn on newspaper clippings. Needless to say, this movie is a visual treat much like its predecessor, and it explores the potential of animation in completely different ways. It plays with itself. Across the Spider-Verse doesn't have a story or script as good as Into the Spider-Verse, but there's definitely a reason for this. This is absolutely a Matrix situation. This is a film trilogy being created retroactively after the success of the first film, and the final two films are both halves of one cohesive story. The first half of this film is an absolute slog, to be honest, filled with exposition and world building that the previous film already established. There is definitely important information that's conveyed in the beginning, like Gwen's backstory, a small synopsis of Into the Spider-Verse, Miles' character development, and his strained relationship with his parents, but this could have been condensed into 20 to 30 minutes instead of what felt like an entire hour. The second half saves this movie. Although it doesn't feature clever humor like Into the Spider-Verse and lacks a true direction and narrative, it effectively establishes Miles' conflict with Miguel O'Hara and his Spider Society, while also building a load of tension and plot twists that will undoubtedly be paid off in Beyond the Spider-Verse, releasing in March of next year. Although Across the Spider-Verse feels toned down compared to the radically subversive Into the Spider-Verse both visually and narratively, it constantly experiments with a multitude of mediums and artistic techniques to create a sensory melody that is unlike anything ever seen before. Although the writing suffers greatly from being the first half of a larger story, it adequately serves its purpose of building anticipation for something much greater. It's hard to follow up a perfect movie, but I appreciate its hefty ambitions, which is why I give Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse an 8 out of 10.